The morning sun rose over the vast plains of Eastern Europe. Mist clung to rivers and forests, masking the movements of armies hidden in the shadows. Farmers in the villages below whispered about a new terror on the horizon, rumors of Mongol cavalry moving faster than the eye could follow. Little did they know, the man behind this unstoppable force was not a king, not a warlord seeking glory, but a silent genius, a strategist who would become history's most feared general, Subutai. Europe believed itself safe, shielded by rivers, mountains, and stone fortresses. Kings and princes were confident that no army from the distant steppes could challenge their defenses. But Subutai knew better. From his base with the Mongol forces, he studied maps, terrain, enemy behavior, and intelligence reports. He knew where the weak points were, where fear could be sown, and where armies could be divided and destroyed. Victory, Subutai would later reflect, begins in the mind. And in the minds of Europe's defenders, panic would soon take root. Subutai's brilliance lay not in brute force, but in orchestration. Before a single arrow was loosed, he had already envisioned the battlefield in his mind. Rivers, forests, mountain passes all became tools in his grand strategy. Unlike European generals, who often fought isolated battles, Subutai coordinated multiple armies across hundreds of miles simultaneously. He divided his forces strategically. One contingent would advance into Poland, another into Hungary, while smaller units moved behind enemy lines to cut off reinforcements. Scouts and spies brought intelligence from villages, towns, and even enemy camps. Subutai analyzed it all, predicting moves before they were made, calculating outcomes in ways his enemies could never comprehend. The Mongol army was like a living organism, flexible and responsive, moving with a speed that left Europe's heavy cavalry in disarray. Subutai knew that psychology was as important as swords and arrows. Fear, confusion, and misinformation would do as much work as any attack. By the time the European armies saw the Mongols approaching, they were already losing the battle in their minds. Subutai's first test in Europe was Russia. The key cities of Ryazan, Vladimir, and Suzdal had walls, armies, and defenses that European generals considered sufficient. Yet against Subutai, these defenses crumbled. He relied on speed, coordination, and unpredictability. Rivers were crossed at night. Small detachments scouted ahead, sending false signals of retreat or disarray. Villagers who attempted to warn the cities were intercepted, and panic spread like wildfire. The Mongols attacked suddenly, striking from unexpected directions, bypassing walls when possible, and exploiting the smallest weaknesses in the defenders' formation. Subutai's forces moved with such efficiency that Russian armies found themselves outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and psychologically overwhelmed. By the end of the campaign, entire cities lay in ruins or surrendered without a fight. Europe began to take notice of the ghost general, a commander who seemed to appear everywhere and nowhere, a shadow on the battlefield. The Battle of Mohi, Hungary. Perhaps the pinnacle of Subutai's European campaign was the Battle of Mohi in Hungary, 12-4-1. European leaders gathered their forces along the Sajo River, confident that their numbers and fortified positions would withstand the Mongol threat. They were wrong. Subutai's plan was brilliant in its simplicity and audacity. The river, usually considered a natural barrier, was crossed at night, with engineers constructing temporary bridges under the cover of darkness. Mongol units appeared in multiple locations, confusing the enemy and stretching their lines thin. Feigned retreats drew Hungarian cavalry into traps carefully set with hidden Mongol reserves. The enemy, believing victory was within reach, found themselves surrounded, outflanked, and crushed. From high ground, Subutai observed the battlefield, adjusting movements and directing attacks with precise timing. By the end of the day, the Hungarian army was shattered. European leaders were left stunned, unable to comprehend how a relatively small Mongol force had defeated their much larger armies. Subutai had done more than win a battle, he had rewritten the rules of warfare in Europe. Subutai's genius extended beyond tactics and battlefield maneuvers. He understood the power of fear and deception. Before a battle began, Mongol forces would spread misinformation, sometimes through captured messengers or local villagers, suggesting that the Mongols were larger in number or already near victory. Enemy morale crumbled even before combat. Soldiers doubted their leaders, fortresses felt insufficient, and commanders became hesitant in their decisions. Subutai's attacks were not just physical, they were mental. By the time the first arrows fell, the enemy was already halfway defeated in their minds. This psychological edge gave the Mongols an advantage that brute force alone could never achieve. Europe had seen invaders before, but none had mastered the mind as a weapon like Subutai. Subutai's campaigns were also marked by patience and cunning. He did not always strike head on. Sometimes he withdrew deliberately, feigning weakness to lure enemy forces into traps. These feigned retreats were meticulously planned, with hidden reserves ready to strike at the decisive moment. In one instance, a Hungarian detachment pursued Mongols who appeared to retreat into a narrow valley. Unbeknownst to them, Subutai had positioned hidden cavalry along the slopes. When the enemy was fully committed, the Mongols attacked from all sides, annihilating the detachment in a single devastating blow. Every maneuver, every retreat, every strike was calculated to create maximum effect with minimal risk. Subutai's patience was as deadly as his speed. News of the Mongol victories spread quickly. King Bela Thaufar of Hungary, Polish princes, and other European nobles were horrified. The ghost general was everywhere and nowhere. Fortress walls, rivers, forests, nothing seemed to stop him. Letters sent to Rome and other kingdoms described the Mongols as supernatural or invincible, capable of moving armies faster than horses should allow. Subutai had become more than a general. He was a legend that terrorized kings from afar, reshaping Europe's perception of warfare. Yet despite the fear, few in Europe knew his name. He was simply the Mongol mastermind, an invisible hand guiding armies that seemed to appear from nowhere. Subutai's European campaigns changed the continent in lasting ways. Entire regions were devastated, kingdoms forced to reconsider their defenses, and armies humbled by the precision and intelligence of his strategy. But more importantly, his campaigns demonstrated a timeless lesson. Victory is achieved through intellect, foresight, and understanding your opponent, not just through numbers or strength. Subutai's legacy is a reminder that strategy can outweigh brute force, and preparation can outweigh chance. His methods are still studied in military academies today, though his name remains unfamiliar to most. Europe may have survived, but it would never forget the shadow that passed through the ghost general who moved faster than any army could follow. Subutai's conquest of Europe was not complete, but the lessons of these campaigns were clear. Genius does not seek recognition. Mastery moves silently, strikes with precision, and adapts faster than anyone can respond. As the Mongol armies prepared for further campaigns into Central Europe and beyond, Subutai continued to observe, calculate, and plan. For every fortress that resisted, every army that regrouped, he had already anticipated the next move. The ghost general's shadow stretched across continents, unseen, unstoppable, and unforgettable, a man who taught the world that true power lies not in fame or size, but in the mind that directs the storm. Europe had felt the bite of Subutai strategy, but the story of the Ghost General was far from over. Stay tuned for our newest episode of the Unsung Heroes.